At this year's G20 Summit, President Yoon pledges more funds from South Korea to fight hunger. The South Korean leader also strongly condemned Russia and North Korea's military cooperation. Moscow ramps up its offensive against Ukraine's Odessa, and President Putin approves an updated nuclear doctrine in the wake of the U.S. allowing Ukraine to use long-range American missiles inside Russia. Russia sends an economic delegation to North Korea to receive an unusual welcome from Kim Jong-un amid their cozy relationship under a new treaty. We take a look at where the peninsula issues stand ahead of the incoming Trump administration in Washington. It's November 19th, 8 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon. We start yet again in Brazil, where the South Korean president vows tangible efforts to fight global hunger and sends a stern message towards Russia and North Korea. Our Oh Soo-young files this report from Rio.
President Yoon pledged $10 million to battle hunger in Africa and the ramping up of global food aid by 50,000 tons next year. This came as the South Korean leader attended the G20 Summit, which kicked off on Monday in Rio de Janeiro. After participating in the launch of the Brazil-led Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty, Yoon set out South Korea's contributions and solutions. He announced Seoul will provide $10 million worth of humanitarian aid to address Africa's food crisis by the end of the year. He also said South Korea plans to ramp up its global food aid contribution by 50,000 tons to 150,000 in 2025 through the United Nations World Food Programme. Seoul has already doubled its contribution this year compared to 2023.
At this year's G20 Summit, President Yoon emphasized that achieving a sustainable future for humanity requires inclusive economic growth in developing countries. He stressed the importance of structural reform and fiscal innovation in developing nations to leverage the private sector's capabilities fully. He also argued that the G20, as the top forum for global economic cooperation, must support efforts to create new growth drivers in developing countries.
In this regard, Yoon announced South Korea's intent to increase contributions to the International Development Association by 45% compared to 2021. The IDA, as part of the World Bank, provides grants and low-interest loans to help countries invest in their futures. He also said Seoul will look to increase its contributions to the Pandemic Fund, which aims to strengthen pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response capacities.
Based on South Korea's own experience of rising from the ashes of war and poverty, President Yoon highlighted the country's role as a bridge of prosperity, connecting developing and advanced economies.
The Yoon administration held South Korea's first ever bilateral summits with Pacific Island Forum countries and African Union nations, and plans to hold a summit with Central Asian countries in 2025. Furthermore, the president emphasized that economic growth of developing countries can only be achieved within the framework of a rules-based order, noting North Korea's large-scale troop deployments to Russia and that the Ukraine war has entered a critical phase. Yoon strongly urged Moscow and Pyongyang to immediately cease their illegal military cooperation. Yoon further appealed to G20 leaders to unite in their will and actions to uphold the global rules-based order. The leaders of Japan, Germany, Canada and Australia also criticised the Russia-North Korea axis, deeming it a threat to global security. On the sidelines of the multilateral summit, President Yoon also met with the leaders of MICTA countries, Mexico, Indonesia, Korea, Turkey and Australia for the third consecutive year. They adopted a joint statement reaffirming their commitment to cooperate on areas such as sustainable development, world peace and security and global governance. Amid growing concerns around the world over North Korea's collaboration with Russia, the MICTA leaders called on all UN member states to uphold the UN Charter and abide by Security Council resolutions. Addressing the meeting of the world's 19 largest economies, the European Union and the African Union, President Yoon on Tuesday will emphasize South Korea's role as a green ladder to help developing economies achieve both growth and carbon neutrality. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News, Rio de Janeiro.
And leaders from the group of 20 major economies paid much attention to multilateral trading system this year, as President-elect Trump is set to return to the White House in the coming months. Our Lee Soo-jin explains more.
In a few moments,
Leaders of the G20 economies are striving to strengthen a multilateral consensus as they prepare to grapple with U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's protectionist policies. The group of 20 leaders on Monday local time issued a joint statement on the first day of the two-day summit in Rio de Janeiro that reflected concerns about higher import tariffs ahead of Trump's return to office next January. The G20 referred to the World Trade Organization in the statement, emphasizing the need to ensure a rules-based, non-discriminatory, fair, open, inclusive, equitable, sustainable, and transparent multilateral trading system with the WTO at its core. Trump, during the campaign, pledged to bring a manufacturing renaissance to the U.S. by raising the prices of imported products, including those manufactured by U.S. allies, to increase demand for American-made products. To do so, he has proposed implementing steep tariffs on Chinese goods ranging from 60% to 100%, as well as a universal tariff of up to 20% on imports from all other nations. Trump's proposed tariffs not only threaten South Korea's trade, but also that of the world.
He will expand the trade war not only against China, but also other countries as well. If Trump is elected, he's going to expand tariffs to all items, and it will be raised to at least 10%.
And while this may help U.S. manufacturers compete with cheaper-priced products from countries like China, concerns remain as tariffs often raise both inflation and interest rates, the latter of which will impact other nations as well.
The U.S. is likely to have higher inflation, and that will lead to higher interest rate policies for not only U.S. but globally.
Ahead of the upcoming shift in the global order, the joint statement highlights the G20 nations' determination to strengthen multilateral unity in the face of tariffs that may potentially undermine cooperative trade agreements and policies. 이수진, Arirang News.
U.S. President Joe Biden attended what's likely to be his last summit with world leaders in Brazil, but he was missing from a group picture of the leaders of the G20 Summit, whereas Chinese President Xi Jinping took center stage. Choi Min-jung tells us more.
G20 leaders linked hands and posed with smiles on their faces with the waters of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil in the background. But missing in the picture was U.S. President Joe Biden. Biden was already too late when he headed for the group photo. U.S. officials blamed logistical issues. He intended to be a part of the picture, but the photo shoot reportedly happened earlier. While Biden was out of the picture, Chinese President Xi Jinping posed front and center, with South Korean President Yoon standing behind him. It is rather unusual that world leaders did not wait for Biden considering Washington's status in the international arena. This also comes after Biden earned awkward headlines on Saturday after being spotted at the back corner of the APEC group photo in Peru. During his last G20 summit before the end of his presidency on Monday, Biden called for an end to crises unfolding around the world. He reiterated U.S. support for Ukraine's sovereignty while calling for efforts for a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas.
I ask everyone here to increase the pressure on Hamas, which is currently refusing this deal.
Meanwhile, Xi stated that the international community must build an open, inclusive, and non-discriminatory environment for mutual cooperation. He vowed to open China's doors wider to the least developed countries and reaffirmed his commitment to free trade in the face of protectionist policies pushed by U.S. President-elect Donald Trump. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
Over in the Middle East, Israel and the militant group Hezbollah based in Lebanon continue to trade fierce fire amid the planned arrival of a U.S. delegation seeking peace. Yoon has the latest.
Amid the escalating bombardments between Israel and Hezbollah, U.S. envoy Amos Hochstein is expected to arrive in Beirut on Tuesday to discuss a U.S.-backed ceasefire proposal. This comes as Lebanon and Hezbollah have shown a willingness to engage in ceasefire talks. However, earlier statements from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu indicated that even if an agreement is reached, Israel will continue its military operations against Hezbollah. Meanwhile, civilian casualties continue to rise. According to the Lebanese Health Ministry, following another Israeli strike on central Beirut on Monday, 5 people were killed and more than 30 have been left injured. This follows Sunday's Israeli strike, which killed Hezbollah's chief spokesperson and resulted in additional civilian casualties. Hezbollah continued its strikes on Israel, with one rocket hitting a building in the city of Shefaram, northern Israel on Monday, killing 1 Israeli woman. Israel's rescue team reported that 10 others were injured in the attack. According to the Israeli military, shrapnel from an intercepted missile over the city of Tel Aviv wounded at least 6 people, including 1 woman who's in critical condition. On that same day, Hezbollah claimed responsibility for launching airstrikes with drones targeting sensitive military points in Tel Aviv. Yoon, Arirang News.
Russia's aerial assaults against Ukraine intensifies, this time targeting the city of Odessa, which killed 10 people. Kim Bo-kyung has this report.
With the war in Ukraine nearing its 3rd year, Russia launched its largest aerial attack on Ukraine in months. Its ballistic missiles hit Ukraine's Black Sea port of Odessa on Monday. At least 10 people reportedly have been killed and dozens wounded, according to the region's local governor. Moscow's latest aerial attacks on Ukraine followed reports that outgoing U.S. President Biden authorized Kyiv to use powerful long-range American weapons in Russian territory. One expert says this serves as more than a warning to North Korea after the regime deployed troops to help out Russia.
Well, it's more than just a warning to North Korea, really. Ukraine will now use those U.S.-supplied ATACMS, these longer-range missiles, to strike targets not only in Russian-occupied Ukraine, but in Russia itself, and that includes North Korean forces.
Experts agree this could give Ukraine a bargaining chip and also boost its defense capabilities.
This is a dramatic step because it does give the Ukrainians the ability to hit really important military points and infrastructural points inside Russia, and that will absolutely have an effect on Russia's ability to wage war.
But he added it can't be a game changer, and for Ukraine to win the war, more needs to be done to squeeze Russia, particularly in the months before President-elect Donald Trump comes into power. Regarding Biden's decision, there was no direct comment from the U.S. State Department during a briefing on Monday, but it did say that the U.S. had been clear to always adapt and adjust the capabilities the U.S. provides to Ukraine when it is appropriate to do so. The Kremlin accused Biden of escalating hostilities, saying it is obvious the U.S. wants to, quote, throw oil on the fire and escalate the conflict, and that it is going to bring a qualitatively new round of tension. However, EU member states welcomed Washington's decision, and the European Union's foreign policy chief further urged member states to allow Ukraine to use EU-supplied arms to strike targets inside Russia, saying Ukraine needs to use the arms EU provides to not only stop the arrow but also hit the archers. Meanwhile, Germany is to deliver 4,000 strike drones, dubbed mini Taurus, to Ukraine, according to the AFP reports, though it reiterated it won't be sending its long-range Taurus cruise missiles. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Against this backdrop, Russian President Vladimir Putin on Tuesday approved the updated nuclear doctrine. It states that Moscow can use nuclear weapons against a non-nuclear state if it's supported by nuclear powers or in the event of a large-scale air attack with non-nuclear weapons, including drones. This follows the United States giving Ukraine permission to use long-range missiles to attack military targets inside Russia. North Korea's Kim Jong-un hosts a Russian delegation in an unusual way amid the regime's closer relationship with Moscow under a new treaty. Our Kim Jong-sil explains what this could mean.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un showed exceptional hospitality to Russia's Natural Resources Minister Alexander Kozlov, who arrived in Pyongyang over the weekend. Video released by North Korea state-run media shows Kim smiling as he shakes hands with the Russian minister and engaging in discussions at a table. Throughout the meeting, Kim is seen smiling widely. The footage also includes scenes of Kim personally escorting Kozlov outside the building, a rare gesture highlighting their growing alignment. North Korean state media also reported that Kim and Kozlov discussed strengthening bilateral cooperation in trade, science, and technology under the new treaty signed in June. The Russian delegation led by Minister Kozlov arrived in Pyongyang on Sunday for the 11th Trade and Science Cooperation Committee meeting. A South Korean Unification Ministry official told reporters on Tuesday that this was the first time a Russian representative has met directly with Kim during this kind of meeting. One expert in South Korea speculated that Kim's exceptional hospitality may be linked to the new treaty coming into effect.
President Putin recently signed the new treaty, and it's possible the delegation brought the ratified documents to North Korea. Once both sides sign them, the treaty will take effect only after the ratified documents are exchanged. I think it's highly possible that those documents were brought along.
Professor Kim added that with North Korea sending a delegation to Moscow on Monday, it's likely the ratified North Korean documents were carried. He noted that the treaty will take effect once the documents are exchanged, which could happen as early as Tuesday. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
So while North Korea is accelerating its cooperation with Russia, U.S. President-elect Trump is returning to the office in January. Eyes are now on what's to come next. For more, we have our foreign affairs correspondent, Eun-ji, here in the studio. Welcome, Eun-ji.
Thanks for having me.
So Kim Jong-un sent a message towards the United States for the first time since the November election. What might be the intention behind?
For more than a week, North Korea has remained relatively quiet about the U.S. presidential election and Trump's victory and return to the White House. But it broke its silence yesterday, and we saw Kim criticizing Washington, saying trilateral cooperation between South Korea, the U.S., and Japan is a critical factor that threatens peace on the Korean Peninsula. He also said the United States and the West have been staging the Ukraine war in order to expand the scope of Washington's military intervention into the world. Yet he has yet to publicly acknowledge that he has been providing troops to Russia or mention Trump's political comeback. Experts say that the strategic intention behind this is to justify his military support to Russia while trying to gain the upper hand in arms control negotiations after Trump's second-term administration kicks off next year.
Kim Jong-un did not directly mention troop deployments, but by criticizing the West regarding the Ukraine war, I think North Korea is indirectly trying to justify its actions.
And some analysts say that Kim's message is to build cohesion within the military and solidify his role as the regime's leader amid their troop deployments to Russia and the presidential transition in the United States.
And Trump has already named a list of people who will serve in his cabinet. How is the new administration expected to handle North Korea issues?
So the two key words that describe Trump's picks to the new administration are loyalists and hardliners. Trump is set to appoint those who are known to take a hardline approach to foreign affairs as he prepares to push forward with his America First foreign policy. First of all, he selected Mike Waltz as the White House National Security Advisor. Waltz is a Florida Republican and a Trump loyalist who's considered a foreign policy hawk towards China and Iran. And as for Secretary of State, he's expected to name Senator Marco Rubio, which will make him the first person of Latin descent to serve as America's top diplomat. Rubio has in past years advocated for a muscular foreign policy towards America's geopolitical foes, including China, Iran, and Cuba. Analysts say that Trump is not expected to put huge pressure on North Korea throughout his second term in office.
The new Trump administration will keep its current level of denuclearization and deterrence efforts, but I don't think it will try to engage in nuclear negotiations with North Korea or change the North's policy by pressuring the regime.
Will Trump and Kim meet again?
Possibly, but it seems highly unlikely for now. So Trump and Kim met 3 times during Trump's first term, but Trump failed to persuade Kim to give up his nuclear weapons. They first met in Singapore then in Hanoi, and finally in the demilitarized zone between the two Koreas. But the talks ended without any breakthroughs. During his campaign, Trump said getting along with Kim Jong-un is a good thing and that Kim misses him. But experts that I've talked to have said Kim doesn't have much to gain from meeting Trump because he needs something more than a good photo op, and it won't be easy to reach an agreement on nuclear issues. South Korea's unification minister also said this week that it won't be easy for the two leaders to meet again, as the geopolitical situation has changed since Trump's first term, and because the North has advanced its nuclear and missile capabilities over the past several years. As the United States and the international community are calling for a complete denuclearization of North Korea, he said it's highly unlikely that Washington will recognize North Korea as a nuclear state and engage in nuclear disarmament talks. But given Trump's unpredictability, we cannot rule out the possibility of diplomacy resuming between them, so we'll have to see how that unfolds.
We'll have to see. All right, thanks, Yunji.
Thank you.
South Korean boy band Stray Kids will become the first K-pop group to perform at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in London, England. The stadium is home to English Premier League club Tottenham Hotspur, a team captained by South Korean star Son Heung-min. JYP Entertainment announced on Tuesday that the concert is scheduled for July 18, 2025 as part of the group's Dominate World Tour. There will be 20 concerts across Latin America, North America, and Europe. The group is currently on a tour in Asia, which includes stops in the Philippines, Macau, and Japan.
Until this morning, the weather stayed colder than the norm. However, during the daytime, temperatures gradually recovered to the previous year's temperatures. Starting at 0 degrees in the mornings, Seoul will be a bit milder than today, with highs moving up to 12 degrees tomorrow. With big fluctuations between the cold morning and mild daytime, make sure to dress in layers. Tomorrow night, rain will begin on the west coast of Gyeonggi-do Province, Gangwon-do Province, and the Chungcheong-do Provinces. The expected amount of rainfall is around 5 millimeters in these areas. Tomorrow morning will start cold with single figures. Gwangju 6, Daegu 4 degrees. Daily highs will move up to 14 degrees in Gwangju and Gyeongju, Chuncheon 10 degrees. For the rest of the week, the weather will be similar to that of late autumn at this time of the year. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session up next.
How to survive in Korea. Cafes. Step 1. Find a seat. Before ordering, find a seat. laptop ID, smartphone, jacket, whatever that can mark your territory. But no bites. It's a little too big. Step 2. Pick up. We do not ask or call your name. We call out, B69 고객님. The buzzer will vibrate when your order is ready at the counter. Wait, got your straw? Keep the top of the wrapper on. Doing this is more hygienic. Step 3. Cafe etiquette. If you need to use your laptop, find a seat next to a socket. No extra charge for using electricity. But if you're staying over 3 hours, how about ordering another drink or dessert? Step 4. Last bite standing. There's a mysterious custom in Korea. The last bite standing. When there's about 1 bite left of that cake, nobody will go for it. You might be tempted, but don't be hasty. Right before you get up, take the last piece, saying that you simply can't waste food, or just leave it. It will save a few calories. Did you survive at the cafe? Did someone behind the counter catch your eye? Go for the same drink every single day.
오늘도 아이스 말차 라떼 드실 거죠?
You might make an impression.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we delve into the most recent issues across the globe. I'm Kim Mo-gen. Now that President-elect Donald Trump has secured another 4 years in the White House, he's filling key posts in his second administration, rewarding longtime loyalists and aides who were his strongest backers during the 2024 campaign in his legal battles. With Republicans taking control of the Senate, many of Trump's cabinet nominees are likely to face an easy path to confirmation, even some who may be controversial. The U.S. president-elect is aiming to announce all of his cabinet-level picks by Thanksgiving. America's allies and partners have been keenly watching the formation of Trump's security and foreign policy team for clues as to how Trump would handle relations with U.S. allies and tackle regional and global security challenges. So which of Trump's posts is South Korea keeping a close eye on? And what does his appointment lineup signal for America's future? For this, we're joined in the studio by Jong-un, professor at the Korea National Diplomatic Academy. Welcome, Professor.
My pleasure.
And we're also joined by our go-to Voice of America correspondent, Jessica Stone from Washington, D.C. Great to see you, Jessica.
Good to be with you.
So let's first start with Professor Min. As president-elect prepares for his re-entry to the White House, he's ramping up cabinet appointments. Let me ask first, what stands out most about his latest nominee picks?
Well, I think that Donald Trump's cabinet appointments this time stand out two things: loyalty and speed. First, Trump has almost finished his cabinet appointments and even his second term is still 2 months away. So fast. And it is reported that Trump appointed the people who are not selected as his running mate, like a vice presidential candidate during the presidential campaign this year. And the cabinet appointments include 5 people who are considered as a running mate. For example, the House Representative Ellis Stephanie was nominated as ambassador to the United Nations, and the Florida Senator Marco Rubio, who was the final contender for the vice presidential nomination against J.D. Vance, were selected as a Secretary of State. And the North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, who supported Trump in the early primary, he was nominated as Secretary of the Interior. And it is known that these people were chosen by Trump because they have already proven their loyalty, which is the most important criterion to the cabinet appointment this time. And meanwhile, Trump could announce his cabinet appointments very quickly this time because, again, he formed his cabinet based on people who have already been verified. Right? And it is known that these cabinet appointments are based on Trump's own assessment that the biggest mistake he made in his first term was hiring people who are not loyal to him. Right? So, and as you may remember, during his first term 8 years ago, there was a chaotic transition of power and delays in the appointments of high-ranking officials. But this time, based on the sour experience 8 years ago, Trump tried to make the quick appointment. However, in terms of the quick appointments, there is also a concern that Trump is making impromptu and appointments without any screening, investigation, or Senate consultation. So we can see some controversies around his cabinet appointees nowadays.
Right. So how much loyalty and the speed of his selections. Now, staying with the speed of President Trump's nominee pick, Jessica, American news website Axios says it took an average of 8 days for Trump to fill up 12 executive posts in his cabinet, while President Biden and former President Obama took around 40 days reportedly to fill up as many positions. Isn't this a very fast pace, like our Professor Min said? What could be the reason behind such rapid appointments?
So Professor Min is right that loyalty is a big part of these picks, but the other main criteria, as I see it, through looking through these names and covering this administration the first time around, is that they all want to make big changes to government. That's a priority for Trump. He wants to remake the U.S. government, make it more efficient, more lean, more responsive to the American people, and that's what he promised on the campaign trail. That's certainly something previous Republican candidates have promised before, and even Democratic candidates. I think of Bill Clinton. But the key here is the speed is part of getting that work started quickly. There is so much inertia in Washington, and Trump certainly learned a lot about that inertia for change. People, so many millions of people in this town work for the government, including myself. And so there is a natural inertia to changing that, to paring back government. And part of the strategy that he's employing here, which is really buttressed and supported by the conservative Republican movement and the Project 2025, is providing the list of people that can be appointed to the Trump administration on day one. They've created a big part of Project 2025 is not just the policies that they're proposing, but a huge database of people that are ready to go, ready to be appointed, and ready to work in the federal government to pare back the size of government, which is a key agenda of the conservative wing of the Republican Party.
Right. Now let's speak more about the detailed nominees. Trump's choice of Matt Gaetz as Attorney General came just a 2-hour decision. It was just a 2-hour decision made on an airplane. What's the local sentiment regarding this impulsive appointment?
Well, you know, he may have been made a decision in 2 hours, but this Matt Gaetz has been a longtime supporter and vocal supporter of President Trump. He proved his loyalty during all of those hearings on Capitol Hill about the Russia allegations that the president and his team had conspired with Russia to steal the 2016 election, all of which proved to be false. And he also helped prep him at debates. Matt Gaetz has been a loyal person, defender of the of also the agenda that the Trump administration has to remake the Department of Justice, which now, if it confirmed, he would take over. I mean, on X, he said prior to being nominated, quote, "We ought to have a full court press against this weaponized government that has been turned against our people. And if that means abolishing every one of the 3-letter agencies from the FBI to the ATF, I'm ready to get going." Again, if confirmed, he would be responsible for doing just that. That if is still a big question. I mean, he is one of the more controversial picks. It's clear that Donald Trump was very excited to appoint somebody who would turn heads in Washington and even beyond for the appointment. And he's certainly turning heads on Capitol Hill. There are senators who will vote on him who say that they won't know which way they'll vote. But there are Republican senators who've already come out, especially the center right or the center Republicans like Lisa Murkowski of Alaska or Senator Susan Collins of Maine, who've said, look, you know, this guy is not a serious candidate. He is already facing a House Ethics Committee investigation, which may or may not continue after the confirmation process, meaning that he left Congress, so there's not going to be a decision, but there could be a report, and that could shape the confirmation process for Matt Gaetz. There's a lot of things swirling around him, and that's going to go to whether or not he's confirmed. It'll be part of the discussion for sure.
Right, so we'll have to see if he has a thorny road ahead. Now, Professor Min, among the most talked about candidates is, of course, Tesla CEO Elon Musk. What will Musk's proposed Department of Government Efficiency entail, and what role might he play in the administration?
Yeah, basically, Elon Musk could take the various roles under the second Trump government, but Trump argued during the presidential campaign that he would go through a large-scale reduction in the federal government, including laying off the government officials if he takes office. And Trump mentioned that government officials would be reviewed, and some of them could be replaced by loyal political appointees if they do not meet the qualifications. And such work would be led by Elon Musk, who would be the head of the Ministry of the Government Efficiency or Department of Government Efficiency. And it is known that Musk laid off about 80% of the existing employees when he acquired the SNSX in 2022. So then Musk argued at the Trump campaign rally that eliminating waste could cut U.S. government spending by at least $2 trillion. And according to the Treasury data, the U.S. federal government spent $6.75 trillion in the most recent fiscal year. So it means that Musk's proposed $2 trillion cut could reduce about 30% of total federal spending. And it is reported that Department of Education and the Department of Defense could be the first targets for the government reform on the second Trump government. So the Washington and political community are really the chaotic, or they're very upset about what's going on, under the second Trump government.
Right, so this efficiency was about cutting spending mostly. Now, Jessica, Elon Musk is said to be actively influencing economic policy and major cabinet positions right now, which has reportedly led to dissatisfaction among Trump's close aides. What's the general atmosphere in the U.S. regarding this situation?
Well, I would add to Professor Min's comment about speed that also part of Elon Musk's appeal to the Trump administration is that he wants to make things more efficient by virtue of deregulation, right? This is an innovator who has faced a lot of regulatory hurdles for his own innovations, especially SpaceX. And so part of the appeal for him to the Trump administration is that he wants to change that. And it's something that many of the other appointees that Trump has put forward also agree with, particularly the energy sector. His orbit is really known for having multiple camps of people arguing. I covered the first Trump transition and the first Trump White House. It was incredibly chaotic, and you would get a lot of leaks to the press because people were not disciplined and they weren't always on the same side and they were trying to push their own agenda. That dissonance is still happening, perhaps on a smaller scale in the transition. We're already seeing that because of these reports to Axios and NBC News, where there is sort of the old guard, the people who have been with Trump since the very beginning, like Boris Epstein, who are now saying, hey, listen, this Elon Musk guy, he's trying to take over and push his agenda. But remember, this is also a man who contributed $119 million to the campaign. So it's certainly within the realm of possibilities that he might feel he can have that level of voice. And we know that he's even going to be inviting, he's just Trump is going to the SpaceX launch, I think, in the next couple of days with Elon Musk. He has a lot of appeal for that reason because he is emblematic as a businessman of many of the complaints that Trump has given voice to in this country. But there's also the skeptics, of course, who say Musk's stock in Tesla has gone up by almost $100 a share since he kind of got close to Trump. So this is something that will continue to, I'm sure, cover this sort of tension with this administration because he does take a lot of business people into the administration, and that can represent some conflicts of interest.
Now, then for South Korea now, the identities of key foreign policy and security officials are very important. Trump has nominated candidates for Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, and National Security Advisor. Professor Min, what key commonalities could we assume from Trump's foreign policy and security team?
Well, there could be the further characteristics that they share together. I think that Trump's campaign appointees, including the foreign policy people, can be featured as we mentioned, loyalists and young practitioners and hardliners on China and efficient alliance system or something like that. So we already talked about first the feature, loyalist, just a skip about it. And the second feature is that the relatively young people in the 40s and 50s have been appointed. So it's a very interesting point to make. And the third feature is that they have a good understanding. The foreign policy people have a good understanding of America First foreign policy, and they take a hard line, the policy stance against the forces that threaten or are hostile to the United States. So they are very tough on China, and they also believe that they will definitely win a war against China if necessary. So the containing and pressuring China will be the core policy of the second Trump government. And they also want to operate the U.S. alliance system more efficiently. So it seems likely that they will push U.S. allies to increase their defense spending and the burden sharing.
Not that good news for South Korea. Now, as for Secretary of Defense, Trump has nominated Pete Hegseth, a Fox News host, and many have been surprised at the announcement. Jessica, could you explain for us who is this figure and what's the background behind this appointment?
So Pete Hegseth is a military veteran. He served in both Iraq and Afghanistan and served with distinction. But he's also someone who has really taken strong positions in the media. And that's really where his latest iteration has been, both in writing, because he wrote a book called The War on Warriors, and on his television appearances, you see him there, against a culture inside the Pentagon that prioritizes diversity, equity, and inclusion in hiring, and not meritocracy alone. So there's this conflict between some of these culturally driven hiring practices that certain people in the United States, especially in the MAGA movement, oppose. They say, you know, that you should be chosen on merit alone, and we shouldn't be looking at race, gender, sexual orientation, et cetera, in the hiring practice. He wrote this Woke Warriors book and really gave voice to a lot of those sentiments, and said that that's really creating a problem with recruitment in the Pentagon. Critics say, though, that he hasn't really got much management experience. He has no evidence of having, you know, sort of the ability to manage this enormous bureaucracy of more than 1 million people. And the press outlet Roll Call did ask senators for their thoughts on him. One of the things we found out in that reporting was that a lot of people on Capitol Hill don't even know who he is. If you're not a loyal Fox News viewer, you may not know who he is. And so he's going to have to spend some time on Capitol Hill getting to know people and sharing with them a little bit more why he's qualified. If I can, I want to make one other point on Professor Min's question, too, which is Senator Rubio has already gone on the record talking about burden sharing and his philosophy on increasing alliances with other Asian partners in addition to South Korea. So really investing in those alliances as a deterrent to China. So I would be hesitant to say for sure that this will come at a cost to South Korea, but I would just have you look at some of his stances already on rebuilding the alliances in the region. And some of that is something that the Biden administration has done. I think he's going to make the case to the American people, which needs to be made, that reorienting the U.S. government around opposing China in the economic and technology space and the defense space is in their interest, because within the next 5 to 7 years, we could see, you know, real impacts at home on the price of goods and on military action for Americans. And that case has to be made in order to win the American people toward that cause. And that's something certainly national security people in Washington see, but the American people need to see it too. And that's something that I think he has already begun to make, even though he's not confirmed yet.
Right, of course. Thank you for pointing that out, Jessica. Now, Trump has nominated Senator Marco Rubio for Secretary of State and Representative Mike Waltz for National Security Advisor, and they're both known as hawks on China, like you've mentioned. How do you foresee the future of U.S. foreign and security policy evolving?
Well, basically, I think the second Trump government is expected to be very aggressive on checking the rise of China upon taking the office. And I think it will focus on the selective decoupling in high-tech industries and reducing U.S. trade deficits with China. And based on the claim that U.S. will regain economic independence from China by Trump and re-emerge as a manufacturing powerhouse, it is expected that the Trump second government will pursue a 4-year national reshoring plan and attempt strategic decoupling with China centered on steel, electronics, pharmaceuticals, and advanced technologies. And tariff plans such as the universal baseline tariffs and the Trump Reciprocal Trade Act will be used as a main means to reduce U.S. trade deficit with China. And this, along with the measures such as China's withdrawal of most favored nation treatment and the ban on the U.S. companies' investment in China and China's purchase of U.S. assets, will likely result in strong opposition and resistance from China. So the conflict between U.S. and China across the trade sector, economic sector, is likely to lead a second U.S.-China trade war and have a major impact on the global economy. But meanwhile, regarding military and security matters, where U.S. maintains a relative advantage over China, the two countries will refrain from the direct military conflicts and will prepare for the long-term competition by continuously improving regional security, cooperation, military innovation, and military technology development, status quo will be managed.
Mm-hmm. Now, while Trump's choices for Secretary of State and National Security Advisor represent a typical hardline stance now on North Korea, former Congressman John Ratcliffe, nominated as Director of National Intelligence, has advocated direct negotiations with North Korea. Considering the backgrounds of these advisors, how do you view Trump's approach toward North Korea moving forward?
Well, the experts are talking about the various scenarios that about how the Trump second government will deal with the North Korean matters. But basically, in my personal opinion, I think that the deadlock in North Korea-U.S. relations will be resolved through the summit diplomacy under the Trump government. Of course, it's not certain yet about what North Korea policy direction the Trump second government will show, but it seems likely that summit diplomacy will be revitalized. In November last year, 2023, North Korea announced through its ambassador to the United Nations, Kim Song, that if U.S. want to talk with North Korea, it should stop its joint military exercises with South Korea. Meanwhile, Trump emphasized his amicable relationship with Chairman Kim Jong-un during his re-election campaign. And as you may remember, Trump already accepted North Korea's request or demand to stop the joint military exercises as a precondition for meeting with Chairman Kim under his first government. So it shows that there will be no further particular restrictions or hurdle on a summit meeting between North Korea and U.S. if Trump is reelected under the second Trump government. So, and the improvement of North Korea-U.S. relations and the easing of tensions on the Korean Peninsula through the revitalization of summit diplomacy could rekindle the Trump's will to challenge the Nobel Peace Prize.
Right, so we'll be looking forward to more possible negotiations with North Korea. Jessica, now we still have more posts to be appointed. Among the yet-to-be-announced appointments, which officials who are related to the Korean Peninsula should be paid more attention to?
I do think we need to watch out for people who are working on China policy. You know, we haven't seen any major announcements on that, and I'm watching that closely because, of course, that's a big part of what I do as a reporter is see who those names are. And I think we're going to see more people come back from the Trump administration who worked on the Trump policy. If you look just at and I strongly recommend you read Project 2025 because it does give you an idea who are the people who are shaping the policy. And some of those people were in the Trump White House. Peter Navarro, who was in charge of some of the decoupling that started under that administration. You know, we don't have any names yet, but I have certainly been meeting with people who I anticipate will have some kind of role, and they continue to take that stance of decoupling, of using focusing on using U.S. military might, but also economic tradecraft and economic pressure tools as part of diplomacy, leveraging regional allies, as I mentioned earlier, and increasing burden sharing. So no names yet, but and nothing that would probably mean anything to your audience, but people that have been part of this really huge shift in American thinking and government about the position on China. And that is totally in line with what Trump campaigned on and what he's talked about. And also, you know, to some extent, to what Elon Musk has talked a little bit about. Obviously, he has huge interest in China with the Gigafactory and things. But if you want to dominate the next iteration of technology in AI and supercomputing, there have to be some fundamental changes in the trade relationship and the economic relationship. And Professor Min talked a little bit about that. And that's part of what I think we're seeing here is an agreement, actually, really, between the left and the right on this. We've seen them almost come full circle in terms of their thinking on this.
All right. Thank you for clearing that up. I'm afraid we'll have to wrap up our discussion here. We're running out of time. Many thanks to Professor Min and, of course, our Jessica Stone for sharing your expertise. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great discussion. Thank you.
Now, thank you again for joining us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.
Are you curious about